Real-life horror stories that will haunt your every move. Be advised, it's so terrifying that 90% of people couldn't last more than 30 minutes before shutting it off. Consider this your only warning.
Part 1, 1:36 a.m. Rain blurred the world into streaks of gray. Daniel Carter had been driving for 9 hours straight, hauling refrigerated freight across 3 states. The highway cut through miles of empty farmland, a long black artery disappearing into fog. There were no towns out here, no rest stops for another 50 miles. Just road. Just rain. Just the steady hiss of tires on wet asphalt. The dashboard clock glowed softly. Rain sliding off the brim of the officer's hat. Water dripped from his sleeve. He still hadn't looked Daniel in the eyes. "Step out," the officer said. Daniel hesitated. Protocol was simple. Comply. He shut off the engine and stepped into the rain. The cold hit him instantly. Up close, something felt wrong. The officer smelled faintly of river water. Stagnant. "You been drinking tonight?" the officer asked. "No, sir." "You sure about that?" "Yes, sir." The officer turned slightly toward the back of the truck. "Open the trailer." Daniel frowned. "Sir, it's sealed freight. I don't have—" "Open it." The tone hadn't changed, but something beneath it had. Something hollow. Daniel walked toward the rear doors, heart beating faster now. He glanced back once. The officer stood motionless by the driver's door, head still lowered, rain sliding down his face. Daniel reached the back of the truck, fumbled with the flashlight clipped to his belt. When he turned around, the patrol car was gone. No headlights. No engine noise. No tire tracks in the mud. The shoulder behind the truck was empty. Completely. Only rain and darkness stretching back into fog. Daniel stared. He walked a few steps forward. Nothing. No vehicle. No officer. The highway lay silent. He spun slowly, scanning the empty road. No red lights in the distance. No receding engine sound. Nothing. His breathing quickened. That's not possible. He climbed back into the cab, started the engine, checked the mirrors. Empty. He sat there for a long moment, then shook his head. Fatigue. You're just tired. He pulled back onto the highway. The rain continued. The fog thickened. He drove. 10 minutes. 15. 20. The road remained identical. Flat farmland. Occasional fencing. Nothing remarkable. Then headlights illuminated a highway sign ahead. Green reflective paint. He read it as he passed. Welcome to Black Ridge County, 12 miles. Daniel frowned. He had passed that sign earlier. He was sure of it. He checked the odometer. It showed distance traveled. He had moved. He knew he had. He drove another mile. Another sign appeared. Same county.
Same font. Same distance. 12 miles. His stomach tightened. "That's not funny," he whispered. He checked the dashboard clock. 1:36 a.m. His breath caught. That couldn't be right. He looked again. Still 1:36. He had been pulled over at 1:36.
He remembered that clearly. He gripped the steering wheel harder. The rain seemed louder now. Then, a figure stood ahead, directly in the lane. Daniel slammed the brakes. The truck shuddered violently. The figure did not move. A woman, white dress plastered to her body, long dark hair hanging forward, dripping wet. She stood facing away from him, perfectly still. The headlights illuminated her pale legs and soaked fabric clinging to thin shoulders. Daniel's heart pounded. He leaned forward. "Ma'am?" No movement. He blinked, and she was gone. Not stepping aside, not running. Gone. The road empty again. His breathing turned shallow. He checked the clock. 2:13 a.m. How? Red and blue lights flared behind him. Bright. Immediate. Daniel's entire body went cold. The same patrol car. The same old model. The same flickering strobes. He didn't remember seeing it approach. Didn't hear it. It was just there. He didn't want to pull over, but he did. The officer stepped out again, uniform soaked, hat low, same posture, same unnatural stillness. Daniel rolled down the window before he reached it. "You already stopped me," Daniel said quickly. The officer didn't respond. He leaned closer. For the first time, Daniel could see part of his face. The skin looked pale. Not pale like illness, pale like something that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. Water dripped steadily from his chin. His eyes remained shadowed. "You never left," the officer whispered. Daniel's mouth went dry. "What?" "You never left." The words sunk in slowly. Daniel glanced forward. The highway stretched ahead, but something about it felt compressed. Close. Wrong. He looked in the side mirror. The mile marker beside the shoulder read, "Mile 36. He had seen that marker before, more than once. His hands trembled. The officer's face moved closer to the glass. "Open the door." And for the first time, Daniel noticed something else. Beyond the patrol car, beyond the fog, shapes in the darkness along the roadside. Rows of vehicles, parked, still, doors open, waiting.
Part 2, Mile Marker 36. Daniel didn't open the door. He couldn't. His hand hovered inches from the handle, trembling, while the officer stood inches away on the other side of the glass. Rain streaked between them like thin prison bars. "Open the door," the officer repeated. Same tone. Flat. Measured. Daniel swallowed. "You already pulled me over." No reaction. Water dripped from the brim of the hat. The officer's face remained partially hidden, but Daniel could see more now. The skin looked swollen, not rotting, not injured, just waterlocked, as if it had been submerged too long. "You never left," the officer whispered again. Behind him, through the fog and darkness, Daniel could see them clearly now. Cars, dozens of them, parked along the shoulder, some angled crookedly, some perfectly straight, all with their doors open, interior lights dead, no hazard flashers, no movement, just rows of abandoned vehicles disappearing into mist. Daniel's pulse slammed in his ears. "I'm calling dispatch," he said instinctively. The officer didn't move. Daniel grabbed his phone. No signal. He looked at the dashboard. The clock flickered. 2:13 a.m., then 1:36 a.m., then 2:13 again, blinking between the two like a dying heartbeat. His fuel gauge hadn't moved, not even slightly. That wasn't possible. He had been driving nearly 40 minutes since the first stop. Unless... His eyes slowly lifted to the windshield. The mile marker sign stood just ahead of the truck. 36. Same chipped paint in the lower corner. Same dented post. He had never passed it. The officer tapped the window once. A dull, hollow sound.
Open the door. Daniel shook his head. No. Silence stretched. The rain intensified, drumming harder against metal and glass. Then the officer did something new. He raised his head, just slightly, enough for Daniel to see his eyes. They weren't glowing. They weren't black. They were empty. Not physically empty. The sockets were there, but the gaze held nothing. No focus. No recognition. Just an endless depth, like staring into water at night. You caused this. Daniel's throat tightened. I don't even know you. The officer's lips twitched faintly. You were driving. The words were heavier now, layered, as if spoken twice. Once from the mouth, once from somewhere behind it. Daniel's mind raced. Driving. Driving when? He had never been arrested. Never been in a serious accident.
Never. The radio snapped on. Loud. Static blasting through the cab. Daniel flinched. The officer didn't. The static cleared. A news broadcast crackled through, distorted and old. Quote, fatal collision occurred at approximately 2:13 a.m. when Officer Raymond Hale initiated a traffic stop on a suspected intoxicated driver. Daniel's breathing stopped. Quote, the driver allegedly fled the stop, striking the officer on the shoulder of Highway 47 near mile marker 36. Daniel's eyes moved slowly toward the sign again. Quote, Officer Hale was pronounced dead at the scene. The broadcast looped. The same sentence again. And again. And again. Daniel looked back at the officer. Raymond Hale. The soaked uniform. The empty gaze. The endless patrol. You think that was me? Daniel whispered. The officer leaned closer. Rainwater slid down his face in steady streams. You were driving. Daniel's memory flickered. Headlights in heavy rain. A shadow in the road. A shape in the shoulder. A jolt. No, that wasn't real. He would remember something like that. Wouldn't he? The radio volume spiked suddenly. The voice warped. Quote, driver never located. Quote, scene remains active. Quote, officer continues patrol. The broadcast dissolved into static. Then silence. The officer's hand slowly reached for the door handle. Daniel's heart pounded so hard his vision blurred. He locked the door instinctively. The officer's hand stopped inches away from the handle, then lowered. Behind him, one of the abandoned cars flickered. Its headlights turned on briefly, then off. Another further down. A third. Like a ripple through the darkness. Daniel's breathing became shallow. Who are they? He whispered. The officer didn't turn. They stopped. He said quietly. A gold wave moved through Daniel's spine. They stopped. And didn't leave. The woman in white flashed in his mind. The faceless figures in the passing pickup. The shapes along the roadside. They're not with you, Daniel said, voice shaking. The officer was silent for several seconds. Then, no. The word came out strained. Different. Less controlled. The temperature inside the cab dropped noticeably. Daniel could see his breath faintly in the air. The officer's posture changed. For the first time, he seemed tense. Not authoritative. Afraid. A low sound drifted from the darkness beyond the parked vehicles. Not wind. Not an engine. Something heavier. A dragging sound. Slow.
Wet, like something being pulled across asphalt.
Daniel's stomach twisted. The officer turned his head slightly toward the noise. Just slightly. His body didn't move, only his eyes. And in that moment, Daniel saw something he hadn't before. The officer wasn't holding Daniel here out of anger. He was holding him here because he couldn't leave. Because something else owned the road now. The dragging sound grew closer. One of the parked cars shifted slightly, rocking on its suspension. Another door creaked wider. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. "What is that?" he whispered. The officer's jaw tightened. "It waits." "For what?" The officer looked back at Daniel. "For you to step out." A shape moved between the abandoned cars, low to the ground, too large to be an animal, too fluid to be mechanical. It didn't reflect the headlights properly. It absorbed them. The darkness around it felt thicker, heavier. Daniel's entire body screamed at him to drive, to floor it, to smash past the officer and never look back. But the mile marker remained. The same rain, the same stretch of road. He had tried driving. He had never left. The officer stepped closer to the door. "Stay in the vehicle," he said. His voice had changed again, less hollow, more urgent. It was no longer a command. It was a warning. The dragging sound stopped. Complete silence swallowed the highway. Even the rain seemed muted. Daniel could feel something watching the truck, circling, not visible in the mirrors, not visible in the headlights, but present. The officer's eyes remained locked on the darkness behind Daniel. "If you open the door," he said quietly, "it doesn't let you back." Daniel's throat tightened. "You don't let me back either," he whispered. The officer's expression didn't change. "I don't decide." The silence stretched. Long. Suffocating. Then, Daniel's engine coughed. Once. Twice. The dashboard lights flickered. He hadn't touched the key. The officer's eyes snapped back to him. The fuel gauge dropped suddenly. From full to empty. The engine died. The headlights cut out. The world vanished into black. Only the red and blue lights remained, flashing, painting the fog in pulses of color. The dragging sound resumed. Closer now. Directly behind the truck. Daniel didn't breathe, didn't move. The officer slowly stepped backward from the door, into the rain, into the flashing light.
His voice came once more, barely audible. "Don't answer it." A soft knock echoed from the rear of the truck. 3 slow taps. Then another. This time, from the passenger side window. Daniel turned his head slowly. Something stood inches from the glass. Too tall. Too close. And smiling.
Part 3. The passenger side. Daniel didn't scream. He couldn't. His lungs locked. His body froze in a way that felt mechanical, like something had flipped a switch inside him and shut down every instinct except observation. The headlights were dead. The engine was dead. Only the red and blue police lights pulsed behind him, washing the cab in alternating color. And in that flashing glow, something stood at the passenger window. It was too tall to be leaning normally, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, pressed close to the glass. Its smile stretched too wide, not jagged,
not bloody, just wrong. Too long for a human face, and smooth. Daniel's brain struggled to process what he was seeing. The shape of a person, but incomplete, like a mannequin left unfinished. Its skin looked stretched tight across bone that didn't quite match the surface. Its eyes, there were no eyes, just shallow indentations where eyes should be. The mouth moved slightly, but no breath fogged the window. Tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks. The officer was still standing in the rain on the driver's side, watching it, not interfering, not stepping closer, just watching. The red and blue lights reflected off the thing's smooth face and distorted streaks. It leaned closer, its smile widening further. The glass didn't fog, didn't show breath, didn't show warmth. Daniel's heart hammered violently against his ribs. He remembered the officer's words. Don't answer it. The thing's head shifted slightly, as if listening. Then, a voice came from it, but not from its mouth. From the radio. Daniel's radio clicked on by itself again, static at first. Then, his own voice. Yeah, I'll be home by morning. Daniel's stomach dropped. That was from earlier that night, a phone call he made to his sister before crossing state lines. The voice repeated, yeah, I'll be home by morning. The thing's mouth moved in perfect sync, not speaking, mimicking. The tapping came again, more urgent now. Tap, tap, tap. Daniel turned his head slowly toward the driver's side. The officer was no longer watching the thing. He was watching Daniel. His expression had changed. Less hollow now, almost pleading. Stay in the vehicle, the officer said again. The thing outside the passenger window twitched suddenly. Its neck elongated slightly. A soft packing sound echoed through the cab. Its mouth opened wider, too wide. The smile peeled back,
stretching past where cheeks should allow. Still no teeth, just darkness inside. The radio shifted again. Another voice. A woman's. Soft. Crying. Daniel, please, pull over. His breath caught. That wasn't memory. That wasn't tonight. That was years ago. The night his wife died in a storm accident. He had been driving. She had called him. He hadn't answered in time. The thing outside the window tilted its head further, listening, waiting. The officer slammed his palm against Daniel's driver's side window. The sudden impact jolted him. Do not respond, the officer barked. For the first time, the command carried force. Authority. Anger. The red and blue lights flickered violently. The darkness beyond them thickened. Daniel realized something. The officer wasn't the predator. He was part of the trap, but not the hunter. The thing at the passenger window slowly dragged one long finger down the glass. The sound was wrong. Too deep. As if its nail was cutting into the structure of the window rather than sliding across it. A faint line appeared in the glass. Not a scratch. A seam. Thin. Vertical. Running from the top of the window to the bottom. Daniel's pulse exploded in his ears. It wasn't trying to break in. It was trying to open. Like a door. The same way the officer had opened something years ago. The same way something had been opened on that night in 1987. The officer's face tightened. It feeds on the ones who answer, he said, voice strained. The thing leaned closer, its forehead now pressed flat against the glass. The seam in the window deepened slightly. The radio volume rose, now multiple voices layered together. Whispers, crying, laughter, pleading, every tone soaked in rain and distortion. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, hands gripping the steering wheel. I'm not opening it, he whispered to himself. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then, a new sound. From behind him, inside the cab, a soft shift of weight on the sleeper berth behind his seat. Daniel's eyes flew open. The passenger window was empty. The thing was gone. The seam in the glass vanished. The officer's eyes widened. No. Too late. Daniel slowly turned his head. The curtain to the sleeper compartment swayed slightly. No wind. No movement from outside. just the subtle motion of fabric settling. Another shift, a weight pressing into the mattress behind him. The red and blue lights flickered violently.
The officer stepped back from the truck. He couldn't cross the door. He couldn't enter. Daniel understood now. The officer could only interact at the boundary. The thing could cross once invited. And something inside Daniel had responded. Not with words, not consciously, but fear, memory, guilt. The curtain slowly pulled aside from the inside. 2 long, pale fingers gripping the fabric. Daniel's body went ice cold. The curtain slid open inch by inch, revealing darkness. Not the inside of his truck, just depth, as if the sleeper compartment no longer contained space, but absence. The dragging sound resumed, but this time it came from inside the cab. The officer shouted something, but the words distorted in static. Daniel's dashboard lights flickered once more. The clock flashed, 2:13 a.m. Then, all sounds stopped. No rain, no wind, no radio, no heartbeat in his ears. Just stillness. Then a whisper, right behind him. "You stopped." Daniel felt breath against his neck. Cold, not wet, not warm, just empty. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. The officer's voice cut through the silence from outside. "You have to break it." Break what? The loop. The road? The memory? Daniel's mind raced. The thing behind him shifted closer. The seat springs compressed audibly. Its hand reached slowly towards his shoulder, long fingers hovering inches from his skin. "You stopped," it whispered again. The words carried meaning now, not accusation, confirmation. Daniel's memory fractured. A rainstorm years ago, a dark road, headlights in his mirror, a patrol car, flashing lights. He had been angry, late, distracted. He hadn't wanted the ticket. He had sped off, just for a second, just to prove something, and something had stepped into the shoulder. He remembered the impact now, the thud, the shape in the rain, the panic, the decision not to stop. He had told himself it was debris. He had told himself it wasn't a person. The officer outside stared at him, not angry, not vengeful, just trapped. "You never stopped," the officer said. The hand behind Daniel's shoulder lowered slowly, until one finger brushed lightly against his spine. Cold. The dashboard lights went dark completely. The red and blue lights vanished. The world fell into total blackness. And in that darkness, Daniel heard doors opening, one by one, all along the roadside. Endless, metal hinges creaking in unison. Waiting. Part 4. The place beyond the shoulder. The doors kept opening, one after another. Metal groaning, hinges stretching. A slow, endless chorus drifting through the darkness. Daniel sat frozen in the driver's seat, unable to see anything. Not the dashboard, not the windshield, not even his own hands. Only sound. And the cold finger pressed lightly against the center of his spine. "You stopped," the voice whispered again from behind him. Not accusing, not angry, just stating fact. The officer's voice cut through from somewhere outside the truck, distant now, distorted. "Don't let it place you." The words barely reached him. Daniel swallowed hard. The memory was no longer fragmented. It was clear. Years ago, heavy rain, a flashing patrol car in his mirror. He had been exhausted, frustrated, behind schedule. He had pulled over. The officer approached. Young, calm, professional. Daniel remembered the conversation now. He had been drinking earlier that night. Just enough to make him impatient. Just enough to make him reckless.
when the officer turned back toward his cruiser to run the plates. Daniel had panicked. He thought about losing his license, his job, everything. So he drove, just pulled away, fast. He hadn't meant to hurt anyone. He just wanted distance. The officer had stepped forward, shouting. Then the impact. A shape in the rain. A body on the shoulder. Daniel had never gone back. He convinced himself it hadn't been real, that it was just debris, a shadow, anything but a man. But now, he understood. The loop wasn't random. It wasn't trapping strangers. It was trapping him. The road hadn't chosen him. He had created it. The thing behind him wasn't the officer. It was what had grown in the space he left behind. In the failure to stop. In the refusal to face what he'd done. The cold finger pressed harder. A line of freezing sensation traced upward along his spine. The darkness outside shifted. And suddenly, the windshield lit up faintly. Not with headlights. With depth. The highway ahead was no longer a road. It was an expanse of parked vehicles stretching endlessly into blackness. Hundreds, thousands, all positioned along both sides, every door open, every interior light dead. And between them, movement, shadows sliding slowly from one vehicle to the next, thin, elongated, searching. The officer stood directly in front of Daniel's truck now. No rain.
No flashing lights, just stillness. His uniform still hung soaked and heavy, but his face was fully visible. No shadow from the hat. His eyes were no longer empty. They were tired. "You never stopped," the officer said quietly. Daniel's throat burned. "I didn't know." "You knew." The thing behind Daniel leaned closer. Its breath, if it could be called that, slid across the back of his neck like fog. "You stopped," it repeated. The officer didn't look at the thing. He looked only at Daniel. "It keeps the ones who don't stop," he said. "Why?" Daniel whispered. The officer's jaw tightened slightly. "Because something lives in the pause." The words settled heavy in the air. Daniel glanced toward the passenger side. He could now see the shape inside the cab. It was taller than it should have been, its limbs too long for the space, its face smooth and featureless, except for that stretched smile. It didn't look violent. It looked patient. The officer took a slow step forward. "But it only takes you if you remain in motion." Daniel's brow furrowed. The officer's eyes locked onto his. "You have to stop." Daniel almost laughed, hysterical and broken. "I am stopped." The officer shook his head once. "No." The word echoed strangely. "You're still running." The memory replayed in Daniel's mind. The moment he pressed the gas, the moment he chose not to face what was behind him. The road had frozen that second, looped it, trapped it. He had been driving in that moment ever since. The thing behind him shifted again. Its long finger slid from his spine to his shoulder. "Stay," it whispered. The doors outside creaked wider. The shadows between cars grew thicker. The officer raised one hand toward Daniel. "Open the door." Daniel stared at him. "What?" "Open the door." The same words the officer had said earlier that night, but different now. Not a command, an invitation. "If you stay in the truck," the officer continued, "it places you." "Places me where?" The officer's eyes flicked briefly toward the endless line of abandoned cars. "Out there." Daniel's chest tightened. "You want me to step out there?" The thing behind him tightened its grip slightly, cold pressure digging into muscle. "Stay," it murmured again. Daniel understood now.
The truck wasn't safety. It was denial. The enclosed space, the refusal to confront, the endless forward motion, the thing fed on avoidance.
The officer stepped closer to the driver's door. "I can't leave," he said quietly. "But you can." Daniel's breathing became shallow. "If I step out..." The officer didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "Then you stop." The darkness beyond the windshield pulsed faintly. The shadows between the parked cars began drifting closer to the truck. Drawn, hungry. Daniel's hand moved slowly toward the door handle. The thing behind him hissed softly, not angry, just disappointed. "You stopped," it whispered again. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut. He saw the rain-soaked shoulder from years ago, saw the shape on the ground, saw himself driving away. He hadn't stopped. He hadn't looked back. He hadn't faced it. Until now. His fingers wrapped around the handle. The thing's grip tightened sharply, cold pain shooting through his shoulder. The officer's voice cut through. "Now." Daniel yanked the door open. Cold air flooded in. But it wasn't rain. It wasn't storm. It was still, silent. He stepped down onto asphalt. Solid, real. The thing inside the truck shrieked. The sound wasn't loud. It was layered. Hundreds of voices tearing at once. The truck behind him dissolved into shadow, not exploding, not collapsing, just thinning like smoke pulled apart by wind. The endless rows of cars flickered. Some vanished instantly. Others remained. The officer stood a few feet away. The red and blue lights were gone. The rain was gone. Only darkness and open road stretching forward. Mile marker 36 stood beside them, but the number was fading, peeling away like old paint. Daniel looked at the officer. "I'm sorry," he said. The words felt small, insufficient, but real. The officer studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. The shadows between the cars retreated slowly. The open doors began closing, one by one, farther and farther down the line, metal clicking shut in a wave. The darkness thinned. The horizon brightened faintly, a dull gray pre-dawn light creeping into the sky. The officer's figure began to blur slightly at the edges. "You stopped," he said softly. This time, it sounded different. Not a trap, not a confirmation, a release. The mile marker crumbled into dust. The abandoned cars faded completely. The road stretched forward, empty. Just asphalt, just distance, just dawn breaking over wet fields. Daniel turned to thank him, but the officer was already gone.
In his place stood an empty shoulder of highway. No patrol car, no lights, no rain, only morning, and Daniel standing alone on the side of the road, barefoot. No truck, no engine, no sound but wind and distant grass. He looked down the highway. For the first time, it moved. Cars passed in the distance. Real ones. Headlights normal. Unbroken. Time had shifted. Daniel checked his watch. 6:02 a.m. Hours gone. But forward. Not looping. He exhaled slowly. Behind him, in the far distance, for just a moment, he thought he saw red and blue lights flicker once, then disappear. And somewhere deeper in the darkness beyond the fields, something else watched. Not angry, not gone,
just waiting for the next driver who wouldn't stop.
Part 5. The Level Above. Daniel knew something was wrong the moment he heard traffic. It sounded real. Engines humming, tires rolling, wind moving through open space. But it was too clean, too evenly spaced. Cars passed him in both directions, headlights cutting through early morning gray. No one slowed. No one looked at him, standing barefoot on the shoulder. No one reacted. He waved at a passing sedan. No response, not even a glance. The vehicle moved with mechanical steadiness, perfectly centered in its lane. Daniel stepped onto the asphalt and shouted, "Hey!" A pickup truck drove straight through him. Not physically through him, but through the space he occupied. For a split second, the world overlapped. Metal shimmered inside his vision. Then it was gone. The truck continued down the highway. Daniel stumbled backward, breath hitching. He looked down at himself. His body was still there, solid, visible. But something felt offset, like he wasn't standing exactly where he thought he was. He turned slowly. The mile marker was gone. No 36, no signpost at all. Just smooth, clean shoulder. The dawn light brightened further. Birds chirped somewhere in distant fields. Everything looked normal. Too normal. He began walking along the shoulder. Cars passed in rhythmic intervals. Even spacing, even distance, perfect distribution. A chill crept up his spine. The officer's words echoed in his memory. It feeds on the ones who don't stop. Daniel had stepped out. He had stopped. But what if that wasn't the end? What if that was just compliance? What if he hadn't broken the loop? He had advanced it. After 15 minutes of walking, he saw it. A rest stop ahead. Green highway sign. Black Ridge Rest Area, 1 mile. The same county name, but now clean. No flicker, no glitch. Daniel hesitated, then continued walking. The rest area parking lot was nearly empty. 4 cars parked in a neat line. A vending machine glowing softly near the restroom entrance. The building lights were on. Relief washed over him. Civilization, normalcy. He stepped into the lot. His bare feet made no sound on the pavement. A man stood near one of the cars, stretching his arms after a long drive. Daniel approached him. "Hey, can you help me?" The man didn't respond. Daniel moved closer. "Excuse me?" The man continued stretching, not ignoring him, not reacting at all. Daniel stepped directly in front of him. The man's eyes were open, blinking, breathing, but his gaze passed straight through Daniel, as if Daniel didn't occupy the same layer of space. A wave of dread settled in Daniel's stomach. He turned toward the row of parked cars. All 4 vehicles were evenly spaced, all perfectly aligned, all doors closed, all windows tinted dark. The spacing was too precise, the symmetry too clean. Daniel backed away slowly. The parking lot lights flickered once, then steadied. A low hum vibrated beneath the asphalt, subtle, deep, familiar. Daniel's chest tightened. The hum wasn't coming from below. It was coming from everywhere, from the pattern, from the arrangement, the cars, the building, the lights. The rest area itself was a formation, and he had stepped directly into the center of it. A breeze moved through the lot. The man stretching froze mid-motion. All 4 car doors unlocked simultaneously. Click. Daniel's heart slammed. The man's arms dropped to his sides. His head turned slowly toward Daniel. His face was normal, human, but empty, like a mannequin waiting for instruction. Behind Daniel, another car engine turned off at the same time. A 5th vehicle pulled perfectly into line, equidistant, balanced. The hum grew stronger. Daniel stumbled backward toward the exit, but the lot seemed larger now, longer, the distance to the road stretching subtly, the symmetry tightening. The 5 cars' headlights flicked on together, bright, blinding. Daniel shielded his eyes. When he lowered his arm, the drivers were no longer in their seats. All 5 car doors hung open, the interiors dark, the lot completely silent. Then, footsteps. Behind him. Slow. Measured. Daniel turned. The officer stood at the edge of the parking lot.
Not soaked this time, not broken, his uniform dry, pressed, eyes clear. "You moved," the officer said. Daniel's voice shook. "I stopped." The officer nodded slightly. "You stopped the first level." Cold fear crept through Daniel's body. "Level?" he whispered. The officer gestured subtly to the parking lot. "You left the road." The hum intensified. The 5 vehicles began shifting slightly, adjusting positions by inches, correcting angles, perfecting symmetry. Daniel realized the truth. The highway had been a horizontal loop, movement forward. The rest area was a static loop, stillness, balance. He hadn't escaped the structure. He had stepped deeper into it.
"What does it want?" Daniel demanded. The officer's jaw tightened. "It doesn't want." The parking lot lights flickered again, then synchronized, all glowing at identical brightness. "It organizes." The word hit Daniel like ice. The car's engines turned on simultaneously. Headlights brightened. The hum rose to a low, vibrating tone. The officer looked directly at Daniel. "It places those who don't resolve." "Resolve what?" The officer stepped closer. "The moment." Daniel's breath trembled. "I said I was sorry." The officer's expression didn't change. "You faced it." A pause. "But you haven't paid it." The asphalt beneath Daniel's feet pulsed faintly. The 5 cars began rolling forward at identical speed. Not toward him, toward the center of the lot, forming a circle, a perfect ring. The hum deepened. Daniel's heartbeat synced with it involuntarily. He felt alignment tug at his spine again, that same invisible seam tracing his chest. "You left," the officer continued quietly, "but you're still centered." The circle tightened, the vehicles moving with flawless spacing. Daniel stood exactly in the middle. The pattern was almost complete. "Break it," the officer said. "How?" The circle closed, engines idling in perfect rhythm, headlights illuminating him from every direction. Balanced, symmetrical, complete. Daniel felt the pull intensify, like gravity had shifted inward. The seam in his chest burned faintly. The officer's voice cut through the vibration. "Choose disorder." Daniel's mind raced. He looked at the cars. 5 equal points. He was the center. Remove the center. Break the structure. The hum rose sharply. Daniel ran. Not toward the exit. Not away from the formation. He ran directly at one of the moving cars. The driver's seat was empty, the wheel turning itself. He leapt onto the hood. The circle faltered. Spacing disrupted. He slammed his fist against the windshield repeatedly. Glass spiderwebbed. The hum fractured. The engines sputtered out of sync. The circle collapsed unevenly. 2 cars collided slightly. Headlights flickered wildly. The seam in his chest burned, then snapped. The silence cut instantly. The silence flooded the lot. The cars stopped moving. All engines dead. The circle broken. Daniel fell to the asphalt, gasping. The officer stood at the edge of the lot again, watching. The parking lot lights dimmed unevenly, one by one, not synchronized, messy.
Imperfect. The officer nodded once. "You're learning." Daniel forced himself up to his knees. "This isn't over," he said. The officer's eyes darkened slightly. "No." The horizon beyond the rest stop shimmered. The road beyond it splitting into multiple directions, layered, stacked. The first loop had been time. The second had been space. There would be more. Daniel realized the truth with cold clarity. The highway wasn't a haunted place. It was a system, and he was inside it, not as a victim, but as a variable. The officer began to fade again. "One level at a time," he said quietly. The parking lot dissolved around Daniel, the asphalt thinning, the sky darkening again, the sound of rain returning. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was back inside the truck, engine running, rain tapping against the windshield. The dashboard clock glowed, 1:35 a.m. No red and blue lights in the mirror, no patrol car behind him, just empty highway. Daniel's breathing slowed. Was it reset?
or escalation. He checked the mile marker as he passed it, not 36. The radio clicked softly on its own, static. Then, a soft mock echoed from somewhere inside the cab, not outside, inside, and this time, there was no officer waiting on the shoulder.
Part 6. The One Who Stays. Daniel didn't look back. Not immediately. The knock had come from behind his seat, from the sleeper compartment again. Soft. Deliberate. 3 taps. Not loud. Not aggressive. Patient. The dashboard clock read 1:35 a.m. Rain streaked across the windshield exactly as before. The highway ahead stretched empty and black. No patrol lights in the mirror. No mile marker glitching. Everything looked normal. That was what terrified him. The knock came again. Closer this time. Not from the curtain. From the back wall of the cab. As if something was inside the metal itself. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Not answering, he muttered under his breath. The engine hummed steadily. Fuel gauge full. Speed steady at 65. He passed mile marker 36. Nothing happened. No flashing lights. No woman in white. No rest area. Just road. For nearly 5 full minutes, nothing unusual occurred. Daniel felt something worse than fear settle into his chest. Expectation. He was waiting for the pattern, and that meant he was still inside it. The radio clicked softly. Static hissed. Then silence. Then a voice. Not the officer. Not his wife. His own voice. But calmer. Colder. You don't have to run anymore. Daniel's jaw clenched. The voice wasn't coming from the radio speaker. It was coming from the sleeper compartment. The curtain shifted slightly. No wind. No bump in the road. Just a subtle movement of fabric. You stopped the loop, the voice continued. But someone has to stay. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. The highway ahead began to feel narrower, the darkness thicker beyond the headlights. The lines on the road looked slightly too clean, too evenly spaced. The radio display flickered, then went black. The engine continued running, but the sound was slightly off now. Not mechanical, not quite combustion. It sounded layered, like another engine was idling beneath his own. You can go, the voice behind him whispered. We'll keep the road. Daniel swallowed hard. He understood. The previous loops had been traps, tests, each level breaking symmetry, disrupting formation. But this was different. This wasn't about geometry. It was about substitution. The road required a keeper, a variable to anchor the system. The officer had been one, trapped at the boundary of his death. Daniel had nearly taken his place, nearly replaced him.
But he had stepped out. He had broken alignment. So now, the system was offering him something else. Release. Freedom. In exchange for stillness. The curtain slid open halfway. Daniel refused to turn. He kept his eyes forward. Rain intensified slightly. Look at me, the voice said. It sounded exactly like him. Same cadence, same breath pattern, same subtle rasp in the throat. Daniel forced his gaze into the rearview mirror. The back of the cab was visible, and someone sat on the sleeper bed. Him, perfectly still, wearing the same clothes, same face, but dry,
No rain, no fear, just calm. The duplicate's eyes met his in the mirror. "You don't want to drive forever," it said. The truck's headlights flickered faintly. The lane lines began aligning too perfectly again, spacing equal, distance exact. The road stretching into symmetrical darkness. Daniel's duplicate tilted its head slightly. "You can step out," it continued. "I'll stay." The offer hung heavy in the air. Daniel's hands trembled on the wheel. "What happens if you stay?" he asked. The duplicate smiled faintly. "The road resets. To win. To the next one." Daniel's stomach twisted. The next driver. The next exhausted man on a lonely highway at 1:36 a.m. The next variable. The duplicate leaned forward slightly. "The officer couldn't leave," it said calmly. "He didn't understand the system. But you do." Daniel's breath became shallow. The rain outside began slowing unnaturally, each droplet hanging slightly longer on the windshield before sliding. Time was thickening again. "You feel it," the duplicate whispered. "The balance." Daniel did. The truck, the road, the rain, the empty fields, all centered around him. If he stepped out now, if he agreed, he would anchor this level, become the silent driver, the one who stays, the one whose truck appears in mirrors, the one who knocks from the sleeper compartment. The officer had been a boundary. Daniel would be motion itself. The road would continue, clean, organized, and he would remain inside it, forever driving, forever near mile marker 36. The duplicate's voice softened. "You don't deserve freedom." The words hit harder than any supernatural force. "You left him," it continued. "You ran." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I stopped. Eventually." The lane lines ahead grew brighter, perfectly parallel. The truck's speedometer needle stopped fluctuating.
Locked at 65 exactly. No vibration. No deviation. The system was stabilizing. Choosing. The duplicate's hand rested gently on the edge of the sleeper bed. "You can rest," it said. "I'll take it from here." Daniel realized something in that moment. This level wasn't about guilt. It was about identity. The thing didn't need his body. It needed his pattern, his voice, his decisions, his capacity to drive forward without stopping. The knock came again, but this time, from inside his chest. 3 slow pulses of cold pressure along his sternum, the seam returning. Daniel exhaled slowly. No. The duplicate's expression didn't change. "You can't outrun structure." Daniel shook his head slightly. "I'm not outrunning it." The road ahead began curving gently. Not symmetrical anymore. Not perfect. Just slightly off-center. Imperfect. Rain intensified again. Wind pushed lightly against the truck. The speedometer needle wavered. The duplicate frowned faintly. "You are destabilizing it said. Daniel loosened his grip on the wheel. Let the truck drift slightly within the lane. Not dangerous. Just uneven. Breaking perfect alignment. "You're not me," Daniel said quietly. The duplicate's eyes darkened slightly. "I'm what remains." Daniel shook his head. "You're what replaces." The truck hit a small patch of standing water. The back end shifted slightly. The perfect 65 dropped to 62. The lane lines no longer felt evenly spaced. The hum beneath the engine fractured. The duplicate's form flickered faintly, like static. "You can't erase what you did," it said sharply. Daniel nodded once.
I'm not trying to. The rain now felt real again. Random. Chaotic. Not rhythmic. The duplicate's outline blurred further. You'll drive forever, it warned. Daniel's eyes stayed forward. Maybe. The back wall of the cab shimmered. The duplicate's face distorted slightly. And you'll never rest. Daniel exhaled. Better than trapping someone else. Silence filled the cab. Not heavy. Not humming. Just silence. The duplicate stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, it leaned back into the sleeper compartment, its body dissolving into shadow. The curtain fell closed. The knock stopped. The hum beneath the engine vanished. The road ahead curved naturally into darkness. No symmetry. No perfect spacing. Just highway. Daniel checked the clock. 1:42 a.m. It was moving forward.
But forward. He drove. Rain steady. Breath steady. Hand steady. For 10 full minutes. Nothing happened. No flashing lights. No mile marker glitch. No whisper. Then, in the rear view mirror, far behind him, for just a moment, he saw red and blue lights flicker. Not close. Not pulling him over. Just present. Watching. And for the first time, they didn't follow. They stayed. At mile marker 36.
Part 7. The driver in the mirror. Daniel kept driving. He didn't check the mirror again for several minutes. He was afraid that if he looked too often, it would look back. The rain softened to a steady drizzle. The highway curved naturally now. Gentle bends, uneven shoulders, imperfect spacing between reflectors. Nothing felt mechanically aligned. The clock read 1:58 a.m. It was moving forward. That mattered. His breathing slowed gradually. The tension in his shoulders eased just slightly. Maybe he had done it. Maybe breaking alignment, choosing motion without substitution, had destabilized whatever system had tried to anchor him. Then he saw headlights ahead. Not behind. Ahead. 2 beams cresting a low hill in the opposite lane. Normal. Another vehicle. Daniel felt a strange surge of relief at the sight of something ordinary. The car approached steadily. Its headlights slightly misaligned, one a little higher than the other. Good. Imperfect. Real. As it passed, Daniel glanced sideways instinctively and froze. The driver looked exactly like him. Same profile. Same tired eyes. Same hands on the wheel. The passing vehicle vanished into rain behind him. Daniel's breath hitched. His pulse returned hard and fast. "That's not possible," he muttered. He checked the mirror. Nothing unusual. Just wet highway stretching behind. But a new thought crept into his mind. If the system couldn't anchor him, it could duplicate him. The radio clicked once. No static. No distortion. Just silence. Then, a distant engine sound. Not his own. Close. Very close. Too close. Daniel's skin prickled.
He slowly shifted his gaze toward the passenger side mirror. For a brief second, he saw another truck pacing him. Exact same model, exact same trailer, exact same company logo, running perfectly parallel in the adjacent lane that hadn't existed a moment ago. The other Daniel turned his head slowly, made eye contact, and smiled faintly. Not malicious, not warm, just knowing. Then the lane disappeared. The truck was gone. Daniel's grip tightened. "You don't get to multiply me," he whispered. The road ahead narrowed slightly. The fog thickened. The rain returned heavier. The lane lines began to straighten unnaturally again. Spacing tightening. Perfect. The system was recalibrating. If it couldn't trap him inside a loop, it would replace him externally. Insert him into traffic. Make him part of the pattern.
Not the center. Not the anchor. A moving symmetry. The headlights ahead appeared again. Another car cresting the hill. Again slightly misaligned. Again normal. Daniel exhaled slowly. As the car passed, the driver was not him this time. Just a middle-aged woman staring ahead blankly. But in her back seat, a figure leaned forward between the headrests. Smooth face, no eyes, smiling. Daniel's stomach dropped. The car passed fully into darkness behind him. The thing wasn't bound to him anymore. It was moving, spreading, adapting. The officer had been boundary. The duplicate had been substitution. This was propagation. The system didn't need him specifically. It needed drivers. Forward motion. Choices at 1:36 a.m. Daniel checked the clock. 2:07 a.m. Approaching 2:13 again. The critical time. The rain intensified sharply. The lane lines began glowing faintly in his headlights. Too bright. Too clean. The truck's speedometer drifted back towards 65. Without him pressing the gas. The steering wheel felt subtly guided. Micro adjustments correcting his position. Centering him perfectly in the lane. "No," Daniel muttered. He loosened his grip intentionally. Let the truck drift slightly left. The steering corrected itself. He eased right. The steering corrected again. The truck wanted symmetry. The road wanted alignment. He stomped the brake pedal. Hard. The truck jolted violently. ABS shuddering beneath him. Speed dropped to 50. Then 40. Then 30. The rain roared against the windshield. The lane lines flickered wildly. The steering wheel vibrated unnaturally in his hands. The truck tried to center itself. Tried to maintain flow. Daniel forced it onto the shoulder. Gravel exploded beneath the tires. He brought the truck to a complete stop. Engine idling. Breathing heavy. The clock read 2:12 a.m. 1 minute. Silence filled the cab except for rain. No hum. No whisper. No knock. The road ahead stretched empty. Cars passed in the distance occasionally. Normal. Uneven. Then,
At exactly 2:13 a.m., every passing vehicle stopped simultaneously. Not abruptly. Not screeching. Just stopped. Mid-lane. Perfect spacing. Perfect distance. An entire stretch of highway frozen in symmetrical distribution. Daniel's engine stalled. Headlights flickered. The rain slowed unnaturally again. Time thickened. The stopped car's doors opened at the same moment. Driver stepped out.
Every single one. Men, women, different ages, different clothes, all standing beside their vehicles, facing Daniel's truck, unmoving, evenly spaced across both lanes. The system had found a new center. Him. Daniel stepped out of the cab. Rain hit his face. Cold. Real. He stood on the shoulder. The drivers began walking slowly toward the center of the highway, toward him. Not rushed, not aggressive. Measured, perfectly synchronized steps. Between them, shadows moved, thin, elongated, stretching between bodies like connective tissue. The thing was no longer one form. It was the space between people, the pattern itself. Daniel understood now. Breaking one loop didn't destroy the structure. It forced it to reorganize. He looked down at the asphalt beneath his boots. Water pooled unevenly. Wind pushed rain at an angle. The environment wasn't perfectly aligned. Not yet. He took one deliberate step sideways, off the shoulder, onto the wet grass, breaking the visual symmetry. The drivers paused, just slightly. The spacing faltered. A few of them turned their heads at different angles. The shadows between them flickered. Daniel stepped further into the ditch, slipped slightly in mud, fell to one knee. Messy, imperfect, human. The formation wavered. One driver stumbled. Another turned slightly off angle. The synchronization cracked. The shadows tore apart violently between them. A low screech tore through the air. Not from mouths, from the space between bodies. Daniel scrambled further down into the ditch, rolling awkwardly, mud coating his clothes, breathing ragged. The highway formation collapsed completely. Drivers blinking, looking confused. Rain returning to normal rhythm. Engines restarting one by one. Cars pulling away naturally. Uneven. Random. Traffic resumed. Daniel lay in the ditch, chest heaving. The clock on his dashboard, visible faintly through the windshield, read 2:14 a.m. Forward. Again. He pushed himself up slowly, covered in mud. Cold. Alive. The officer stood on the opposite side of the highway, not glowing, not soaked, just watching. "You are not breaking it," the officer called across the rain. "You are weakening it." Daniel met his gaze. "Good." The officer studied him, then nodded once, but it's still looking for balance. The rain intensified again. Far down the highway, red and blue lights flickered once more, not pulling him over.
Not stopping traffic, just pacing, waiting. And for the first time, Daniel realized something chilling. The road wasn't trying to keep him anymore. It was trying to learn from him.
Part 8. The Mile That Breathes. Daniel climbed back into the cab slowly, mud drying stiff against his jeans. The engine turned over without hesitation, too easily, like it had never stalled at all. He didn't question it this time. He pulled back onto the highway. Traffic moved normally now. Scattered vehicles, uneven spacing, imperfect speeds. A sedan drifted slightly over the lane marker before correcting. A delivery van lagged 10 miles under the limit. Real. Messy. Alive. Daniel checked the clock. 2:19 a.m. Still moving forward. But something had changed. The air inside the cab felt heavier. Not oppressive, but aware. Like the space around him had adjusted. Not to trap him, to observe him. The officer had said it was learning. Daniel believed him. Up ahead, a green mile marker sign came into view through the rain. Mile 237. He passed it. A few minutes later, another green sign appeared. Mile 237. His pulse didn't spike this time. He didn't slam the brakes. He didn't panic. He just watched it pass. Then another. Mile 237. The spacing between them was wrong. Too consistent. Too clean. The mile itself wasn't looping. It was expanding, stretching, breathing. The asphalt ahead shimmered faintly, not with water but with subtle distortion, like heat ripples rising off summer pavement. But this was winter rain. The road wasn't repeating. It was dilating. Daniel glanced at his speedometer. 63. He let off the gas. 58. The scenery did not change pace. Trees along the roadside slid by at the same rate. Distance markers approached at identical timing. The truck was moving, but the mile wasn't. He tapped the brakes lightly. 45. The world outside maintained speed. A cold realization slid into place. The truck was no longer traveling through space. Space was moving through him. The radio clicked on without static. No distortion this time. Just a calm, measured voice. Male. Neutral. Traffic advisory for mile 237. Exercise caution. Reduced visibility reported. Daniel didn't touch the dial. The voice continued. Multiple drivers reporting loss of directional awareness. The rain intensified sharply. Headlights from oncoming traffic began multiplying. Not doubling. Splitting. Each vehicle approaching carried faint after images trailing behind it. Copies of motion. Copies of form. The lane markers began shifting subtly under his headlights, drifting inches left.
Then right, correcting themselves too smoothly. The mile was breathing in and out. Inhale, the world compresses. Exhale, it stretches. Daniel tightened his grip. "You don't get to recalibrate," he muttered. The asphalt ahead rippled. Not violently, not dramatically, just enough that the reflection of his headlights bent unnaturally across its surface, like skin. A loud bang exploded beneath the truck. The steering wheel jerked hard. Daniel fought it instinctively. The truck fishtailed. Rain sprayed violently across the windshield. He corrected, overcorrected, then stabilized, heart pounding. He checked the mirrors. Nothing had hit him. No debris, no tire blown. But in the passenger side mirror, he saw something moving beneath the surface of the road behind him, a bulge in the asphalt, traveling, keeping pace. The road wasn't surface anymore. It had depth. Daniel pressed the accelerator. The engine roared. 70, 80. The bulge accelerated with him, staying just behind the rear axle, pacing, watching. The radio voice returned. Speed is irrelevant. The words were not broadcast this time. They were spoken directly, inside the cab. Daniel's breath fogged the windshield, temperature dropping rapidly. He flipped on the heater. Cold air blasted out. The clock flickered briefly. 2:23 a.m., then 2:17, then 2:25, then stabilized at 2:21. Time was no longer linear here. The mile had detached. Daniel spotted something ahead through the rain. A rest stop 7. Blue. Reflective. Rest area 1 mile. The words felt intentional. Inviting. A boundary. He didn't trust it. But the asphalt beneath him began vibrating subtly. The bulge closing distance. He could feel it under the pedals now. A soft thudding rhythm. Like a heartbeat. Not mechanical. Organic. The mile was inhaling. He needed to break pattern again. Motion hadn't worked. Misalignment had worked. Chaos had worked. He jerked the steering wheel sharply to the right. Not enough to crash, enough to destabilize. The truck veered partially onto the rumble strip. Violent vibration filled the cab. Sound fractured the rhythm beneath him. The bulge faltered, flattened, then reformed. Daniel slammed the brakes, harder than before. The truck skidded violently sideways across lanes. Other vehicles did not react normally. They adjusted perfectly around him, maintaining spacing, maintaining symmetry.
avoiding collision with mathematical precision. That confirmed it. They weren't drivers. They were variables. The truck spun halfway before coming to a grinding stop across both lanes, engines still running, rain pounding. The bulge beneath the asphalt stopped directly under the cab. The road surface began rising slowly. Not breaking, rising, like something pressing upward from below. The metal floor beneath Daniel's boots vibrated violently. He unbuckled and threw the door open. Rain slashed against him as he leapt down onto the wet pavement. The asphalt where his truck had been sitting swelled upward, cracking now, splitting. A long fissure tore open down the center of mile 237. From within, darkness. Not empty, moving. Daniel stumbled backward. Cars around him froze again, drivers inside staring straight ahead, not blinking. The fissure widened, and something pressed against the underside of the road's skin. Not a shape, not a creature. Pressure. A distortion trying to emerge into form. The mile had been its shell, its breathing chamber. The officer's loop had been containment. This was deeper, older. The officer appeared on the opposite shoulder again, not soaked, not ghostly. Clear, focused. "This is the wound," he called over the rain. "You're standing in it." Daniel backed away slowly. "Then close it." The officer shook his head. "You don't close wounds." The asphalt tore further open. Black liquid oozed upward, not flowing outward, just pooling in defiance of gravity. Vehicles closest to the fissure began sinking slightly into the pavement. Drivers still unmoving, eyes forward. Daniel understood suddenly. The road wasn't hunting. It was feeding. The loop wasn't punishment. It was harvesting. Moments of hesitation. Moments of fear. Moments when drivers lost direction. Those fractures allowed it to widen. Daniel's resistance had destabilized it, but also exposed it. The mile inhaled sharply. Every vehicle's headlights flared at once. Blinded. Daniel shielded his eyes. The fissure surged upward violently. The officer stepped forward, into the tear. Not resisting. Not afraid. The darkness swallowed him whole. The headlights snapped off simultaneously. Pitch black. Rain stopped. Sound ceased. For one impossible second, there was nothing. Then, the highway reformed. Perfect. Untouched. No fissure. No bulge. No stopped vehicles. Traffic resumed naturally. Rain returned softly. Daniel stood alone beside his truck. The clock read 2:28 a.m. Mile marker ahead, 2:38. Forward. But as he climbed back into the cab, he noticed something chilling. His hands were steady. Too steady. His breathing was even. Too even. And in the rearview mirror, for just a moment, the driver staring back at him did not blink.
Part 9. You were always the stop. Daniel didn't blink first. The reflection didn't blink at all. Rain tapped softly against the windshield now. Normal rhythm, natural pattern. Passing headlights streaked across the glass in imperfect smears. Everything looked real. Everything felt aligned. But the version of Daniel in the mirror held eye contact just a fraction too long. Then it smiled. Not wide, not monstrous, just slight. Knowing. Daniel's real mouth did not move. His pulse finally spiked again.
The mile marker ahead read 2:39. The numbers were advancing. The world was functioning. But something fundamental had shifted. He looked down at his hands gripping the steering wheel. They were steady. Too steady. His heart was pounding in his chest. He could feel it, yet his fingers did not tremble. His breathing was controlled, measured, automatic. Not forced, not calming, just regulated. Like someone else was driving the physical response. He looked back at the mirror. The reflection's expression had returned to neutral, almost bored. "You're not me," Daniel whispered. The reflection mouthed the same words a split second before he did, not echoing, leading. Daniel's throat tightened. The realization crept in slowly. The road hadn't failed to trap him. It had adapted. The system wasn't outside him anymore. It had shifted internal. He glanced at the clock. 2:31 a.m. Stable. He glanced at the speedometer. 65. Stable. Fuel gauge hadn't moved. Still just under 3/4. Impossible. He'd been driving for hours. Or minutes. Or something in between. The radio clicked on again. No static. No distortion. Just ambient road noise. Distant traffic. Rain. Faint hum of engines. Then a calm dispatcher's voice. Unit 17. Respond to stalled vehicle at mile 239. Driver appears disoriented. Daniel's skin went cold. He checked the mirror instinctively. Red and blue lights flickered faintly behind him, not pulling him over, just following, maintaining distance, pacing. The officer's voice came through next. Measured. Familiar. "I'm already on scene." Daniel's grip tightened. On scene. He looked down at the asphalt ahead. It felt solid, predictable. But something about the passing mile markers felt wrong. Not looping, not stretching, just redundant. He passed mile 239, then 240, then 241, then another mile 239. His stomach dropped. But this time it wasn't a road repeating.
It was the numbers on the signs. The physical signposts were different, bent edges, varying rust patterns, but the numbers were identical. The repetition wasn't spatial, it was informational. The system wasn't warping space, it was warping meaning. He pressed the brake lightly. The truck slowed. Traffic adjusted perfectly around him. No honking, no swerving, just fluid correction. Daniel realized something chilling. Every vehicle around him was a version of someone who had continued, drivers who had resisted just enough to move forward, but not enough to break free. The road didn't need to trap you. It needed you to keep going. Motion sustained it, fear fed it, and identity stabilized it. The mirror Daniel smiled again, this time wider. The truck's interior lights flickered once, briefly, and for a fraction of a second, Daniel saw something else sitting in the passenger seat. Not a full form, just a silhouette, too tall, head tilted slightly, watching him. When the light stabilized, the seat was empty again. He didn't turn his head. He didn't want to confirm it physically. Instead, he focused on the reflection. "You don't get me," Daniel said quietly. The reflection leaned slightly closer to the glass. Neither of them had moved, but it was closer. "You stopped fighting," the reflection said. Daniel's mouth hadn't opened, but he heard it clearly, inside the cab, inside his head. "You stabilized." The words hit harder than anything physical had. It was right. Since mile 238, he hadn't panicked, hadn't destabilized, hadn't broken pattern. He'd driven, calmly, predictably. The road wasn't trapping him anymore. It was integrating him. Red and blue lights intensified behind him. Not urgent, not flashing wildly, just steady, present. The radio crackled. "Unit 17 has visual. Driver appears compliant." Daniel's breathing finally faltered. Compliant. The reflection smiled wider further. "You crossed the wound," it continued. "You stepped into the mile. You're not outside anymore." Daniel's hands began to shake now. Finally, human tremor.
He jerked the steering wheel hard to the left. The truck swerved violently across lanes. Cars around him did not collide. They adjusted flawlessly, symmetrically, maintaining spacing, maintaining flow. The system compensated. He slammed the brakes, hard. The truck screeched sideways and spun. Rain sprayed in violent arcs.
Headlights blurred. The world twisted. The truck came to a grinding halt perpendicular across the highway. Engines around him cut simultaneously. Silence fell. Absolute. Red and blue lights stopped flashing. Frozen mid-rotation. Daniel's chest heaved. He forced himself to look at the mirror again. The reflection was gone. The glass showed only darkness. Then, the passenger door opened slowly. Daniel didn't reach for it. Didn't move. The soaked officer stepped into the cab calmly. Uniform dripping. Hat shadowing his eyes. But this time, he wasn't decayed. He wasn't distorted. He looked almost alive. "You finally understand," the officer said softly. Daniel swallowed. "I'm the stop." The officer nodded once. "You were never the one being pulled over." The highway outside the windshield dissolved. Not shattered. Not torn. Just faded. Revealing something beyond. Rows. Endless rows. Of parked vehicles stretching into black distance. Every door open. Every interior light glowing faintly. Inside each vehicle, a driver, sitting still, hands on wheel, eyes forward, breathing steady, integrated, preserved. The officer looked at Daniel with something almost like sympathy. "The mile doesn't take you," he said. "It replaces you." Daniel's throat tightened. "With what?" The officer stepped aside. Daniel looked forward and saw himself sitting in the driver's seat, already there, hands on the wheel, calm, centered, waiting. The version in the seat turned its head slowly and smiled. Outside, somewhere far behind, red and blue lights flickered again, searching.
Part 10. The Last Patrol. Daniel stared at the version of himself already sitting behind the wheel. Same face, same cut on the knuckle from years ago, same scar near the left eyebrow from a childhood bike crash. It wasn't an imitation, it was him, or at least a version that had already stabilized. Calm, centered, integrated. The officer stepped fully into the cab beside Daniel. Up close, he no longer smelled like river water or rot. He smelled like rain and cold asphalt, like the road itself. "You're at the threshold," the officer said quietly. Daniel didn't look at him. He couldn't pull his eyes away from the other Daniel, the one who looked so steady. "So what happens?" Daniel asked. The officer's voice was almost gentle. "You choose." Outside the windshield, the endless rows of abandoned vehicles hummed faintly. Not engines, something lower, like distant electrical current. Each parked car held a driver, all sitting upright, all staring forward, all breathing in unison. None blinking. They weren't dead. They weren't alive either. They were paused. Preserved moments of compliance. Fuel for continuity. Daniel's reflection, the stabilized one, leaned forward slightly. "You're tired," it said. The voice was smooth, measured, controlled. "You don't have to keep resisting." Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. "I'm not you." The other Daniel smiled faintly. "You will be."
The officer stepped back toward the open passenger door. "If you step out," he said calmly, "you become patrol." Daniel's stomach tightened. "And if I stay?" The officer looked toward the seated version. "You become traffic." Silence. Daniel's breathing grew uneven again. Good. Imperfect. Human. The other Daniel's expression tightened just slightly at the tremor in his voice. "You can rest," it urged. "No more fear, no more confusion, just flow." The endless rows of cars outside pulsed faintly with light, a synchronized inhale, the mile breathing. Daniel felt something tug at his spine, a gravitational pull toward stillness, toward that calm, toward surrender. He understood now. The system didn't torture. It offered relief. Relief from uncertainty, relief from chaos. All it required was alignment. The officer watched him carefully. "Most choose traffic," he said. "They think movement means freedom." Daniel looked down at his own shaking hands. Mud still dried under his fingernails.
His heart still pounding erratically, his thoughts still fractured, messy, unstable, alive. He slowly lifted his foot and slammed it down on the accelerator. The engine roared violently. The seated version of Daniel didn't react. The cab didn't move. The rows of vehicles outside didn't shift. The gas pedal sank uselessly. The officer nodded slightly. "It doesn't work here." Daniel's breathing hitched. Then he did something simpler. He turned off the engine. Silence. Complete. The stabilized Daniel's smile faltered. The rows outside flickered. The hum weakened. The officer's eyes sharpened. "What are you doing?" Daniel didn't answer. He opened his door and stepped out of the cab. Not on asphalt. Not into rows of parked cars. He stepped into darkness. Cold air hit his face. Real wind. Not synchronized. The ground beneath his boots was uneven gravel. Not smooth pavement. He stumbled slightly. The officer's voice called behind him. "If you walk away, there's no road." Daniel didn't look back. Good. He walked forward into darkness. The rows of preserved drivers began flickering violently behind him. The hum rose in pitch. Desperate. The stabilized Daniel finally moved. It stepped out of the truck and stood in the doorway, watching him leave. Its calm expression cracked, fissures splitting across its skin like fractured asphalt. "You need direction," it called. "You need lanes." Daniel kept walking, each step uncertain, each breath uneven. No mile markers, no headlights, no spacing, no symmetry. Just darkness and gravel crunching underfoot. Behind him, red and blue lights erupted violently, not controlled, not rhythmic, flashing erratically. The officer's voice no longer calm. "You don't get to exit." The ground trembled. The darkness tried to smooth beneath his boots, tried to form pavement, tried to give him structure. Daniel deliberately staggered. Let his steps be uneven. Let his breathing stay wild. He tripped and fell hard onto the gravel. Pain shot through his shoulder. Sharp, unfiltered, human. The darkness recoiled slightly. The tremor stopped. Behind him, the truck began dissolving into flickering geometry. The stabilized Daniel screamed, not in rage, but in destabilization, its form bending unnaturally as cracks split through it. The rows of kirked cars collapsed inward like collapsing shelves, headlights imploding one by one. The hum distorted into static. Daniel pushed himself up, breathing ragged. He kept walking. No road formed. No symmetry stabilized. No mile markers appeared. Just raw ground and open dark. Behind him, the red and blue lights flickered once more, then vanished. Silence. Complete. No officer, no truck, no highway. Daniel stood alone in cold night air. Stars overhead. Real ones. unevenly scattered, wind moving unpredictably through distant trees. He turned slowly. There was no sign of asphalt, no tire tracks, no vehicles, just open land, unstructured, free. His watch read 2:36 a.m., the seconds ticking naturally. He laughed once, unsteady, relieved. Then he stopped, because far in the distance, on the horizon, 2 faint red and blue lights flickered, not stationary, moving, searching, slowly. The road didn't need pavement, it only needed drivers. Daniel began walking again, not in a straight line, never in a straight line.